Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you to A Woman Broken, A Woman Healed podcast. I am your host, Phyllis Knight. Tonight, we will be discussing part two of I Do Not Consent. I welcome Geraldine Vincent again to continue our discussion regarding child molestation and sexual abuse. Geraldine is coming to us out of Middle Georgia. She is a married mother of four. She has nine grandsons and three great grandchildren. She is a strong woman of faith, and I've known her for 25 years. Tonight, as we discussed last week about sexual abuse, it is a crime that happens across race, religion, and class and has lifetime effects. It includes any interaction between child and adult or another child in which the child is used for the sexual stimulation of the perpetrator or an observer. We both have had our experiences with child molestation. And as we discussed in our last podcast, I shared my own experiences with child molestation with one of my brothers who is now deceased. We did find out about a year ago after searching for my brother for over 20 years that my brother had been deceased for about 28 years when we actually found out about him being deceased. And at that time, it really kind of freed me up to be able to really discuss what had happened to me because honestly, I felt still a lot of shame, which I didn't have to bear that shame because that was not my shame to bear. I had done nothing wrong, but that's something that we who have gone through child molestation or sexual abuse, a lot of time we hold a lot of shame because we feel, that something's wrong with me. We feel like we've done something wrong, but we haven't. We just hold on to that shame and we bury a lot of our feelings and the guilt and the things that happen to us. We just bury it in our hearts. So today I'm gonna give Geraldine another opportunity to share some more of her experiences, and we're just gonna tap into some statistical information today and how God has allowed us to be healed from the wounds and the hurts and pains of child molestation. So, how are you today, Geraldine?
I am doing fine, fine, sister. I'm doing fine. And thank you for having me again. I was listening to you when you also said the shame that we bear. It's really something when we talk about shame. When you bear something that you're ashamed of, you're ashamed of it because you feel guilty about it, and you feel guilty about it because you're ashamed of it. It sounds crazy, but it's just the truth. Well, you think about it, I feel shame, but what did I do? I feel shame about it, but what did I do? We say that so many times and we bury so many things in our minds. We don't even want to think about it. The things that are the painful, we want to hide it. We don't want it to resurface again. And when you mention your brother, how your brother was deceased, well, that's just really something because, the person that did what they did to me, they are also deceased as well. But it's amazing how it doesn't matter whether they're living or deceased, it still affects you. It still affects you, and it's going to affect you until you get healed and delivered from that, from the guilt and from the shame. And I was so young, I really couldn't even process what had happened to me. I couldn't even put it into words because I was so young. What was done to me, if you ask me, well, what happened? I couldn't tell you because I was so young. And but all I knew is something happened, and what happened to me, it was very painful, and I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to talk about it. But if you was to ask me that, I couldn't put that into words because it was so devastating to me as a child. It was so devastating to me as a child, and I had no one to talk about it to. Why? Because I couldn't put it into words. I couldn't put it into words, and that is devastating for a child. It really is.
You're exactly right. I know when I was a child, I never discussed it with anyone. It's just something that you really don't know how to tell someone what's happening to you, because you're afraid of the person who is doing these things to you. Um, I don't really quite remember my brother ever saying to me not to tell anyone. It was almost like something I knew not to talk about. Maybe he did tell me not to say something. A lot of your feelings and your thoughts and the things that happen to you, we bury them so deep that you just really kind of wanted to stay buried, and you really don't want those feelings to resurface, because when they resurface, then it's almost like you have to live through that pain and that shame, and even, the fear of, something even happening to like your children or your grandchildren, so sometimes it feels better to just, you know, tuck those thoughts and those feelings away, deep into the crevices of your mind, so that you don't have to think about those things again. But I believe in order for us to truly be healed, that we have to, I'm not saying that we have to talk about every single situation that happened, but we have to allow ourselves to feel, you know, what we felt. You know what I'm saying? In order for God to heal us, to know that, okay, yes, I felt ashamed. I felt dirty. I felt, it felt yucky to me. It felt uncomfortable. It was awkward. I knew something wasn't right, but like you said, I was so young, I didn't really know how to express it. I didn't know who to tell, who not to tell. I didn't know if I was going to get in trouble or if he was going to get in trouble. I didn't know if my dad was going to spank me or he was going to get, like we used to say back in the day, he was going to get a whooping. You don't know what's going to happen. So, a lot of times you just keep it quiet and you just bury those feelings and just hope that just go away. You don't have to deal with it. But I believe that God wants us to be healed from it. And even though we tuck it away, God has a way of putting you in situations where those things can come back up so that you can deal with it. And for me, it happened, after I was married and me and my husband had separated. And, for a while, and I went to stay with my brother for a while during that time, my other brother during that time. And we had talked about some stuff, and the one in the conversation, it came up that someone had possibly told my father, they possibly knew. So it made me feel kind of angry, at my dad. So that was really like the first time that I really discussed it, and I was about 25 years old before I really discussed what happened to me, But I think that was the beginning of my healing process. But I didn't really begin to start to deal with my feelings that I had tucked so deep inside of me until I had went to a women's conference. And during that women's conference, that's, through my prayer, praying to God, that's when I really realized that I had a lot of resentment towards my mother. But like we discussed in the last podcast, it's not her fault. Sometimes parents don't know what to do with stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? But we have to find it in our hearts to forgive every person that surrounds that whole terrible, incident that happened in our lives, even our parents, because sometimes parents just don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. I mean, how do you deal with something, like that, So,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, when you talked about, you mentioned about our parents, so many things wasn't talked about, yet they were happening. These things weren't things that was just something new nobody knew about. They never, incest is something that has been going on in families for years and years and years. People, the family, they didn't talk about it. Like I said, that was just happening. You don't talk about that. Even though certain family members might have caught certain family members doing things that they shouldn't, as far as sexually, but they didn't talk about it. And then you have so many people that have fallen victim to this, and they bear They're ashamed. They're hurt. They don't want anybody to know about it. We speak about parents. You know, nowadays they have the good touch and bad touch. They teach children in school about, if someone touch you, not to touch you. But these are conversations that should be had in the home. We should have these conversations in the home with not only our daughters, with our sons, because we mentioned before, boys are sexually molested as well as our girls, but they don't know. We have to give them that information. We have to sit down. We have to talk to them. We have to make them feel safe and let them know no matter what it is, you can come to me, you can talk to me, and whatever's going on, if someone done something to you, I'm going to fix it. We're going to fix this thing. We're going to get you the help that you need to help you to heal, that you can grow up into a young lady and be married and not have problems when you come together with your husband, because it affects women in so many different ways. I mean, this is a big, ugly monster. And it grows and grows and grows until something happens and destroy it. And the only way it can get destroyed by us talking to other women and saying that these women have experienced the same things that you have experienced, but to let you also know that you can be made whole. And I remember this, if nothing else, I did not consent. This horrible act happened to me. I didn't ask for it. I was taken advantage of, and a lot of people that take advantage of people because someone has done the same thing to them, and it's just so sad that it's that way because everything has a root. So this is something that really needs to be discussed in the home, and we need to make sure our children are educated in these areas. And when we run up to women that look like us, that have been through what we've been through, that we've reached a hand out and say, look, sister, I know what you're going through. Let me help you. Let me tell you what helped me. And it's just, like women empowering other women, us encouraging each other, letting them know you can make it. And you might feel like you're worthless, but you're not worthless. And you teach her to know her worth and to let her know that even though this happened to you, you can still be made whole.
That's exactly right. And the thing about it, about 93% of children who are victims of sexual abuse, they know their abuser. So that's almost 100%. So that's like only 7% of the people that are being abused is by somebody that they don't know. So that's why we do have to make sure that we talk to our children. We have to explain to them if somebody touched you, you feel uncomfortable. Like we discussed before, we have to explain to our kids what their actual names of their body parts, and stuff like that. I think I remember one time you said that someone that you knew had named their body parts. What did you say? Mashed potatoes or potato salad or something?
Potato salad, yes. They had potato salad, and they had a little. This was in the school, and they had a little luncheon for the children, and they asked her, "Did she want some potato salad?" And she flipped out. She flipped completely out, and they had to call her mother.
Wow. See, and that's what I'm saying. You have to tell children the truth. You have to tell them exactly what their body parts are, because in that situation, she got scared because she thought somebody was going to be doing something to her because she didn't know what her actual body parts was called. And that's the thing. And 1 in 4 girls are sexually abused, and 1 in 6 boys. So that right there tell you that the likelihood of you knowing a little boy or a little girl that has been sexually molested or has suffered incest or child rape or something like that, someone in your neighborhood, at least 1 or 2 kids, I'm sure somebody. And the thing about it is, there are so many women that have dealt with either incest or being molested. And we don't even think about, when kids are kids and they fondle each other. That's a form of child molestation too. If someone is touching you and they're fondling you as a child, and it can be another child fondling, kids need to know that that's not okay, and we need to
Yeah.
talk about that stuff too, to kids, to our children, to our grandchildren. Somebody is fondling you, just touching you like that. That's a form of child molestation, because they're being stimulated, and that root, it can take root into them, and then it'll go from them fondling one child to outright molesting or raping, another child or a teenager. You know what I'm saying? Because it starts
Yeah.
to, bring about those feelings that kids really ain't ready for, at that age. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? They don't know what to do with
Mhm.
that. They just know, for a kid that does it, it might feel good to them, but it doesn't feel good to the person who is being done to. Because if the
Exactly.
child is so young, they don't understand what's happening to them. So we really have to take those type of things serious, and we really need to have discussions with our children, and we need to be honest, with them, and our kids need to be able to feel safe, that they can talk to us and tell us if someone is doing something to them that's making them feel uncomfortable. And we do not, as parents or grandparents, need to make our kids hug people or anything like that they don't want to hug. If they don't want to hug a person or an adult or something, just leave them alone, because we sometimes we don't know why a kid don't want somebody. Kids has an ability to have that feeling, I don't know, something's not right with that person,
Mhm.
So we really need to, uh, support our kids. When they tell us that someone done something to them, we don't need to make them feel like it's their fault. Like, she's just a fast little girl. What are you doing? You just fast. That's what they used to say when we were kids. She's fast, and they used to say the boys was mannish. Those were the things that they used to say when we were kids. But it's not always because the little girl is fast. Sometimes people have done things to them, so, and kids
You
kind of
are
grow up a
right.
little before their
Mhm.
time.
Mhm. You're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, you mentioned about children being fast and the boy being mannish. The children, a lot of children act out because someone act out on them, and what they're doing, they're reliving what happened to them, and it's really hard. And what we have to do as parents is recognize those red flags. Like you said, don't make them hug certain people, and if they go around that person and they're still real funny, don't leave it at that. When you get them home, say, "Hey, let me ask you something. Why was it when you hug Uncle so and so, so and so, you felt that way?" Then what we also have to realize is we know of people in our families that have had this problem, has done things. Don't you expose your children to them. Don't leave them alone just because it's a family member. No, you don't leave your children in harm's way. And I always tell people, okay, that might be your uncle, but uncle got a problem with his hands. So you will not be left in the room with uncle. You come on. And if uncle try to ever put his hands on you, you run and you tell mama, you tell me. We have to make sure we really, really, really talk to our children and recognize the red flags when we see our children act in certain ways.
You're right. And abusers, they really have a tendency to utilize manipulation, to groom our kids, like we had talked about before, like sometimes kids, they just little kids, they like candy or a soda pop, or maybe they want a video game, or or something like that, something that they really want. A lot of times they groom them to manipulate them, because maybe their parents aren't able, to buy them certain things, so they manipulate them in that way. I know for myself, as a child, my parents weren't able to buy me certain things, and my brother actually used to buy stuff for me to kind of keep me quiet, because yes, I wanted it. I wanted, candy. We had a corner store across the street, and I wanted candy. Kids like candy, and he would buy me candy and sodas, and then it graduated to, he ended up buying me a Swin bicycle, a 10-speed bicycle. I was excited to get that bicycle, and you don't think I was quiet? Yeah, it made me be quiet. But At the same time, I felt ashamed, a sense of shame, you know what I'm saying? But so those are things that happen to young kids, sometimes, and we as parents, sometimes we need to, kind of, think to ourselves, think logically, why is, my brother, or why is somebody in my family buying, I'm not saying that everybody that buy your kids something is doing something to them. Please don't think that. But we do need to, be aware that sometimes if your child around that person and that child feels isolated, like they're isolating your child, or, like you walk in a room and your child, it looks like they're scuffling around, or, you know what I'm saying? Like you need to question what's going on. You know what I'm saying? Because a person that molests children, a lot of times they like to isolate them away from the family. That's how they get them, to take advantage of them. They try to get them off in a room, or get them in a basement, or get them upstairs, or, kind of, block them off, so they can't, make them be quiet, and stuff like that. So we got to be aware, and we got to stay conscientious. One thing I do not like to do, I don't like my grandkids, my granddaughters, being in a room with, older men, or, you know what I'm saying? You gotta, be careful. You gotta be conscious of that kind of stuff. Maybe I'm just overly conscious because of the things that's happened to me. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe I might be a little bit too overly conscious, but I'd rather be safe than sorry, as they say, because but boundaries can get crossed on a child, and then it can cross over to molesting them and physical boundaries that don't need to happen. But we got to be aware, when our children are being isolated from the rest of the family, especially with this one family member that seems to be isolating our children. And we need to ask them questions. Is anybody doing anything to you? Did somebody touch you? Do you feel uncomfortable? It's nothing wrong with asking them questions. I mean, don't try to persuade them to say things that's not true. But, there's nothing wrong with asking them if you may think that something could be possibly going on. What do you think?
I think you're correct in what you're saying. I remember growing up, it was a lot of drinking going on, and they would have places that would sell, liquor, and everybody would be over on payday or whatever, and the kids around, and, the soda bottles used to be worth like 5 cents. If it was a big bottle, you get 5 cents. If it's a small bottle, you get 2 cents. But we were just kids, and our parents didn't have a lot of money. And so we would wait around, when they finished with the bottles, we can get the bottles, and we go to the store and buy something. But this one particular man, I will never forget him. He was a nasty, nasty man. And he really, really was. I tell you what, when you get in his grips, as little kids, you be squirming and trying to get away from him, and he just trying to touch you everywhere he can. But all of these people in the room, but they're doing their thing, they're drinking, they're not paying us any attention, and they just going about their lives. And here you are, you're trying to get away from this pervert, And I used to. I didn't like him, so I would make sure I stayed away from him, because he got me his grips one time, and I tell you what, his hands were so fast, it was like a machine, and he would just be like, he's laughing and talking with us and laughing with the people, and he'd be just feeling all over us, little girls, and I made sure that was his first time and that was his last time, but at the same time, I really didn't know to tell somebody. You see what I'm saying? I knew the way he made me feel, but I didn't know to tell somebody what he was doing to me. And at this time, I know I was older now. I had to be at least about maybe 9 years old, because my mother was 8 or 9. I'm going to say 9 because my mother was still living, and because my mother died when I was 10. And so she was still living. But I didn't know to go to someone and say, this man he's touching me, he's feeling me. I didn't know to do that.
Yeah, you're right.
I didn't know what to do.
Right. I know when I was a little girl also, it was an older gentleman, it was like, come here, sit in my lap, but we have to be careful about allowing our daughters, to sit in men laps. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, when you're like 8, 9 years old, she's a little bit too big to be sitting in some man lap. I don't care if he is a family friend or your, we don't need to allow our little
Mhm.
girls to sit in older gentlemen's lap. Um, I mean, their dad, you know, but we need to be careful about that because sometimes some older men, like you say, they're little dirty old men. They don't have the right mindset. You know what I'm saying? But I
Right.
know back in the day, our parents, dealt with a lot of incest. And we as a people have dealt with incest and rape and things like that. I mean, it goes all the way back to the Bible days where Tamar, if anyone is familiar with the Bible, she was her brother committed incest, Amnon with
Mhm.
her. So this is
Mhm.
not something new. It's been going on,
Right.
since back in the Bible days and the days of King David, incest. But we just have to talk about it. We have to make our family members aware, that when someone has molested someone else in the family, so that if it say for instance I have a little girl and I know that I'm just using a name, just a fictitious name, but say Billy Bob molested my daughter, I need to let some of my other family members know, so that their child don't fall victim to that person.
Correct.
If a
Correct.
person went to court and he was convicted as a child molester, and he has to, what they call it, they have to let it be known that, hey, I live in a neighborhood. Why wouldn't you tell your family members, that you have
Mhm.
another family member who has done something inappropriate to one of your kids, or someone else? We need to let each other know when we got somebody around us that's doing that, because if they done it to me, they may do it to my brother's kids, they may do it
Right.
to
Mhm.
my friends kids or my sister kids, or when I have some family over because I'm having a family gathering, and we got to watch Billy Bob because Billy Bob don't know how to keep his hands to himself. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe we don't need to have him
Yeah.
around when we're going to have a
Mhm.
family gathering. We can't
Right.
be naive and think that we can have family gatherings when we know that he's done something to, you know, my little girl, and then think he's not going to do something to somebody else. We just don't need to have him around. We wouldn't have
That's
somebody else
true.
around, just because he's our family
Mhm.
member. Maybe we don't need to have him around. We have a bunch of little kids over, because that's like a field day for a child molester. But we have family gatherings. Sometimes we just like, oh, well, it's family, whatever. No, he can stay at home. Maybe he needs to stay
Well, you
home.
have to. You have to treat that just like the coronavirus. If you know somebody
Exactly.
has, look, if you know they've been infected, you can't come in. No, because that thing could spread if we let you in here. I ran a daycare for years, and in order to, for everyone that lived in my house had to have a background check. And if they didn't pass a background check, either they was going to get move out or I couldn't run a daycare. Because
Right.
and if somebody had some type of a sexual assault or anything, they could no longer live in my house. Because they have to protect their children. And so that's what
Mhm.
we have to do. If someone is a sex offender, they have to register as a sex offender. And because I ran a daycare, if a sex offender tried to come and live in this area, they couldn't because I ran a daycare. And they will call me up, Miss Vincent, are you still running the daycare? Yes. And he said, well, he won't be moving here because by law, that's what they had to do by law to protect them. So if the law protects you, how much more should we protect our families?
Exactly. Exactly. So, how would you handle if you had a child in daycare? How would you handle that if a child came to you and advised you or made any kind of comments that something possibly could have happened to them? What would be the way that you would handle it as a I'm sorry, as a daycare provider?
Well, as a daycare provider, excuse me, we are trained. I'm sorry, forgive me for that. We are trained. We attend classes and we are
Mhm.
mandated reporters. We have to report it. We have to. If a child comes to you, if they have been sexually molested or abused in any kind of way, we have to report it.
So you would report it to law enforcement?
Yes, yes. But what we do first, we report it to the state. We have to report it to the state. We report it to the state. And after we do that, we report it to law enforcement. We report it to the state because we're running a daycare through the state. And we report it to law enforcement because we mandated by law to report it.
Right.
And I also talk to the parent and I let them know what I have to do. I let them know I have to report this. And they know it. A lot of them get mad or whatever, but I don't be trying to make friends when a child is in harm's way. It doesn't matter to me because I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm just trying to protect that child. And I have had things to happen where I had to do just that on more than one occasion. And so it's just what you have to do when it's really, really, really hard because your heart goes out to the child and your heart goes out to the parent that's not aware of what has happened to the child, knowing what can happen. But this is the good part, if I can say that. If the parent had been the type of parent they're supposed to be and haven't been putting their child in harm's way, they don't have nothing to worry about. You understand what I'm saying? But if they know this, that they keep putting their child in harm's way, well, then they need their child to maybe be separated from them for a little while until they attend some classes and things like that, and to realize the severity of this is serious. It's so serious because it affects children and mess with their minds. I mean, I've heard kids say when they see monsters, and I mean, so many things. It affects you in so many, many, many ways. I'm telling you, even when you become grown and you're married, it affects you in your marriage life. It can affect you if you don't get the help that you need. It can affect you.
You are exactly right.
And the blessing is if God has blessed you with a understanding husband that loves you, that's a blessing. Because a lot of women, they wind up getting divorced. That's just leave them. They don't want to deal with it, because they feel like, look, you are broken and you damaged. I don't have time for you to heal, And that's why it's so important. If any woman, if she listens to this podcast, that if she's struggling, there's help and there's hope. You don't have to live your life being in shame, being in pain, and not being able to function as a woman.
Right. But, sometimes incest can go to a whole nother level, in the sense that some young ladies, have been, raped and abused by like a brother and have had children from their brother or a father or something like that. And that really can play on a young lady's psyche, to have a child by their brother or a father or a family member. And then, they have to deal with the incest and the rape, and then have to turn around and have a baby, that they got to look at this child and be reminded constantly of what has happened to them. That's a whole nother level of not just sexual molestation, but that's incest and sexual abuse and rape, and so they need counseling, to have to deal with that, and a lot of times young ladies, when they've gone through that level of incest and rape, a lot of times they don't want to have relations with men anymore. They'd rather be with a woman because that just, it's such a scar. It's such a hurt and a deep pain, that they have to deal with, to have to, not only be raped and abused by their brother or their father, But now I'm bearing their child and I got to look at this child the rest of my life. And it's not that they don't want to be a mother, but not like that. And so a lot of times if they don't get the counseling that they need, a lot of times these young ladies just don't want nothing to do with men, period. So that's why a lot of times, sometimes women rather be with another woman. They rather be a lesbian than to deal with a man. If they feel like a man is going to treat them like that, so, we really have to, get the professional help that we need. When we were young ladies, especially Black women, the Black, community, we didn't go to counseling. We didn't go to see a therapist. We didn't go to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist. We just didn't do that. I think was pray Psalms 23. The Lord is my shepherd. You know what I'm saying? We didn't do stuff like that. But you know what? We got the opportunity now that we can go and get the counseling that we need. Sometimes we need to go and sit on somebody's couch, somebody who don't know me, they don't know nothing about me, and I can go and talk and I can get this out, and then I can, hopefully go on with my life. But not only that, we can go to our Heavenly Father and He can give us what we need to heal, from all the hurt and all the wounds, because He wants to give us beauty for ashes. He wants to give us the joy of gladness for the spirit of heaviness that we feel from all the hurt and the pain that we have endured in our lives from sexual abuse and child molestation. And and the likelihood of young lady who have been molested and abused as a child, they're more likely to become teenage mothers. Why? Because they feel like, well, I might as well just go ahead and give it to them anyway. Even if I don't want to do it, I just go ahead and do it anyway, because that's the way you look at me. You look at me like that's all I got to offer you. So I just go ahead and do it and get it over with. They may not even want to do that. But because the pain that they have endured as a child, when they become a teenager, it's sewn into their heart. Like, this is just what we do. This is what a woman do. Just give it to them. Even though I don't want to, just go ahead and do it. And then we end up being a teenage mom. So it's so much stuff, that we have to deal with, with sexual abuse and child molestation. The root of it just caused from one thing to another to another. And like you say, it just builds up to, even when you get married, sometimes it makes it hard sometimes to just have regular relations with your own spouse, because of what you endured as a child, because we've never dealt with it. We never dealt with the pain. We never dealt with the shame. We never dealt with the blame. We never dealt with the threats that came along with, the child abuse, and stuff like that. So we really do need to get the help we need. So I think
confession, it's good therapy.
Yeah.
Very good therapy. Talking the matter out, you'd be surprised once you talk about something. Like on last week, as we begin to talk, how God began to minister and to heal.
Right.
And some things that you had pushed so far back, you forgot about some of that stuff yourself, but He allowed it to come to the surface. It's important. It's so important for us to be able to empty out. And once we empty out, God can fill us up. Once we empty out all of the pain and the sorrow and the hurt and the shame that we bared, once He take all of that, allow us to get rid of all of that, He can fill us up with love and joy and peace.
Yes.
And forgiveness. And forgiveness. And you said something that's so important. It is so important to forgive. And people will say, well, how can I forgive that person? They did this and they did this and that. They sure did. And yes, and I understand how you feel. And I understand. But at the same time, that's too much power for anybody to have. Because as long as you hold on to unforgiveness, that person has power over you. As long as you hold on to it, you will always be able to say, they did this and they did that. And the more you say it, the more angry you get, the more bitter you get, and the more miserable you are. But when God when God will help you to forgive someone. When he will say, now look, you forgive those. Forgive them. You forgive them just as I forgave you.
Right.
You got to forgive. We got to
Yes.
forgive. We can't hold on to that. We can't hold on to that. But God can cause you and help you to forgive. The only way you can forgive as you begin to release things and as you begin to realize it wasn't my fault. I
Right.
didn't consent. This is something that happened to me. And then also to think about this, and this might be a hard pill to swallow. And that person that did this to me, what could someone possibly have done to them? That
Right.
person could have very well been a victim themselves.
That's right.
Very well been a victim themselves. And that's the thing where God will cause you to have compassion and forgive your abuser.
That's
Can't
right.
nobody do that but Jesus. Can't nobody do that but Jesus because he did it for
Yes.
me. Because I thought I would never, ever, ever forgive the person that did what they did to me. I thought I would never because they did some of the worst things to me that you can do to a human being. Ever.
Yes. Mm.
I mean, ever. And to one particular thing that happened, I don't even remember what happened after. I don't remember. I remember it happening, but a total blank. I don't
Right.
remember.
Right.
I was just it was horrible. It
Right.
was a horrible thing. And I
Yes.
was like, oh my, I didn't know what to do because I was a child and I was devastated. I think I blacked out. That's what I think.
Right.
I
Yes.
think
I
I
think a
blacked
lot
out.
of times
But I
we
tell
do.
you,
Yes.
because
You do.
I don't remember it to this day. I
Mhm.
think I blacked out. I really do.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think so. It's such a traumatic thing sometimes that happen that we just choose to bury it so deep that anytime I know for me, I feel like when my mind try to go
Mm-hmm.
back there, I like nope. I
Yes.
don't let it go. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh
Mm-hmm.
nope, I can't think about that. you know, but like you said, we have to forgive,
Mm-hmm.
we if we want the most high to forgive us of the things that we've done, we have to forgive others for the things that they've
Yes.
done to us. So
Yes.
the thing about it is, I'm gonna say this and we're gonna go ahead and start wrapping this up. But if any listener out there suspect your child or someone that you know that's been sexually abused or molested, just like Geraldine said, um, report it. Report it to law enforcement, you know, because they need to be held accountable. That's a crime. Especially an adult doing something to a child. That's a crime. You know, now children doing stuff to other children, you may have to pray about how to handle that type of situation because sometimes kids just don't know no better. But when an adult is doing something or someone that's older doing something to a child, it needs to be reported, so that they can become a registered sex offender so that they don't be in a neighborhood where your kids are, or like Geraldine said, where there's a daycare center where they have access to kids or close to a school or somewhere where there's a lot of kids. They don't need to be in that area. So, we have to, loving our neighbors sometime is we got to report stuff like that, because if you love these little kids that's running up and down your street, you don't want nothing to happen to them, just like you don't want something to happen to your own children, and we need to report it. But also what we can do is we can call the sexual assault hotline. It is a safe and confidential service, and you can call that hotline for yourself or someone else. And that number is 1-800-656-HOPE. Again, that number is 1-800-656-4673. Or, like I said, you can contact your local authorities or a medical professional or maybe a pastor at your church or something like that to get the help you need. So I'm going to give Geraldine an opportunity to give her final thoughts, and we're going to go ahead and wrap it up.
Thank you. This is something I would like to add before we end the night. Don't be so quick to allow your children to spend the night at people's houses. And even, people in the church, you got sons and you're a single mom and somebody always want to take them out, whether it be the pastor, one of the deacons, they all want to take your son out and buy him this and that. You investigate that. I don't care if it is the church. You investigate that as well. And this is the final thing I would like to say. And if you have children that are small children that are underage, but you find them doing homosexual acts to one another, that's called child on child, but it's not to be ignored. You seek some professional help for them as well, because that is not something that we should bet an eye at either. Even though it's child on child and they can't get in any trouble, but you ought to also seek help for them and get some professional help for those children as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you to our listening audience for listening to A Woman Broken, A Woman Healed podcast. And we hope that tonight's podcast has been an enlightening conversation. And we hope that you will join us in on our next podcast. And thank you for listening. Have a good evening.